All right, so I got the camera set up on a tripod. This is the 68 Firebird. She's in the booth and she's just about ready to go. Everything is taped. But we went under the front valance and there was a few chips. So we went ahead, put a bit of filler in them. And this is where the lettering goes on the front fender. So I don't know if I should have bothered doing this, but there was some little divots. So probably the last couple times they've been off and the car was painted, people put them on. You got to keep in mind, paint, how would I explain that? If you're going to do flares and emblems and stuff and you're really worried, wait about 4 to 6 weeks. Excuse me. Anyway, so here what I got is a Durablock with a piece of 400 that's a little wore on it. And I got a piece of 320. Now the paint I use, you can use 320 with the DA and it'll cover it. But that's something you're going to have to look at with your technical data sheets. So the 320 in this case, I'm going to take the majority of it down, but you can still kind of see it, but you almost can't feel it. Now when you're working small like this, you don't want to spread scratches everywhere. Try to concentrate just where you're sort of going. Yes, we will feather it out, but we'll feather it out with the 400. This is just to kind of get it down. That one didn't take very much. Trying to put the pressure here but not come over the line. There we go. Now I'm going below the line. So yeah, the paint basically for 6 weeks is pretty flexible and whatnot, and people don't realize that. Even if you leave it out in the sun or whatever you do, it seems dry, you can even cut and buff it. But if you put flares on or little now the decals, they won't eat through the paint, but they'll put little marks in the paint, right? So your paint could be thinner there. How much of a problem it is? Not really. You could have painted right over it the way it was, but because I had to do those stone chips, I thought I'm kind of angling it so I don't rub down. I'm just getting this little bit. Now I'm going to angle it the other way and get this up here. There's quite a hard curve here, so as you can see, I'm only touching it with this much. I'll go to a nice clean spot, which will cut it flatter. But I mean, it's round, so you can see a little line here. Let me check the camera, make sure you can see that. Right here, there's a little line. It's smooth, but that's the filler. It was so thin that it's essentially transparent. Now we're going to take that 320 off and use this, I mean, it's just about new. I used it on this car already, so it's not real sharp. We're going to over sand it because what we want to do is make sure we get these scratches out with this. So the paint I use says I can use 320 with a sander, but by hand it says 400 to 500, so hence the dull 400. Because we're just going to hit this with a skim coat of primer, just so that the paint doesn't do anything funny between the primer and the old paint that's on the car. I found a little dot there. Hopefully our primer will fill that in. Same deal as everything else you block. A little bit of crisscrossing. You can see marks. But I believe they're pretty much gone, except right here. There's a little bit right on this edge. There we go. See, there was a little hole here. It filled. I guess those lines are marked in the paint like a stain, but they're not actually hollow. And you do want that last finish smooth as you can get it, because this is what your paint's going on. And to some degree, your paint basically will 3D print what you're going over. So if you figure I'll put it on thick, that'll hide it. Yeah, that kind of works once in a while, but for the most part, not really. Hang on here a second for me. So you can see a line, but you can't feel it. So that's filler that you're looking at. Now there's a little bit in the hole, so we're going to go ahead and grab a small flat screwdriver or something and gently twist it in there, because you don't want to break it out. You just want to take out what you don't want. Same within there. A gob of it fell through. There, we knocked most of it out already. A little bit there. Some in there. Turns out I don't need a screwdriver. I can probably use my fingernail, mainly because I didn't put much on here. It was like barely putting anything on. And I was using a little metal applicator, which was only 1 inch wide. So, well, would you look at that? I guess we don't have to go get a screwdriver even. That's how thin we were. This hole's a little weird shaped, but that's the shape of that hole for whatever reason. That one's fine. Use my fingernail like a little knife there. Check it out. Now the reason I'm spinning my finger in it is to take the sharp edge off, because you want the primer and paint to flow in. You don't want it to just be like a razor. And I'm just going to push the dirt off. The whole car's already been cleaned, but obviously we're going to have to clean it again because we just did that. Right over here there was a chip that I wanted to fix, and a couple under the valance, so I thought might as well do these at the same time. Let that sit for a second, let it flash off, just so we don't get any new reactions. When I say reaction, if you're going over something like this, an old paint, it's probably like an enamel. But I mean, I don't know what it is, right? It's just whatever paint job they used 25 years ago. It blocks out smooth, which means it would have had a really good buffability to it. But we don't really know what it is. That being said, it's properly cured substrate, so the urethane single stage is a perfect candidate to go right on top of this. This is not a restoration, this is a repaint. All right, that's it. So that we're going to come in either 400 or even a fresh red Scotch-Brite. That'll totally take care of that. The spot over there is done. And when I come off camera, you can see these little spots here. They were full of dust, I guess, so they appeared as we washed the car, or cleaned all the car to get it ready. And then here I'm going to do the same thing, but I'll do that off camera. So as you can see, we got paper in behind there because we don't want to get anything in the engine bay all messed up. Ran tape backwards under these lips and set the paper on top, because all underneath the hood was black. And I mean, it's half decent. It's not mint, but it's decent. But whoever did it before, they didn't really prep in here. They made a mess. It's just a repaint. You can't spend too much time on it, but we did go ahead with a Scotch-Brite, cleaned it up. We took any flakiness off and just hit it with a coating of primer. So that'll just clean it up, that when you open the hood, it's not disgusting, essentially. And it was before. You could see like what almost looked like two whites, but it almost looked more like overspray with dirt and junk in it. So we don't want that look. You know, at least you're at a car show with the hood open, because it's got a nice clean engine, all chromed out and stuff, so why not show it off a little bit? We didn't even take these trim rings off because none of the paint was failing around there. The reason we're repainting this car, when it was originally done 20-some years ago, there was a lot of solvent pop on the roof and trunk lid, and it just sucked. But there was chips and scratches, and it was getting a little dingy here and there. The big thing was right here. Someone had a rag full of brake fluid, left it on the fender. Next morning they went in, peeled a whole strip of paint off here. So the car needed to be refreshed. It didn't need to be restored. Now, some of the challenge we had with the car, the body lines were super wavy. But as you can see, I sanded the white. I actually used the paint of the car that was on there, and we blocked it. And you wouldn't believe how just recreating using the paint, it didn't take much to throw the line off, but it really doesn't take much. So I basically blocked it and blocked from the bottom into it, made it a little bit sharper, but once it was straight, then we gently went in and just rounded it off till it seemed to match. So now when you look down the car, and again, it won't be 100%, but it won't be super wavy. Likely no one will notice it unless you really, really look for it. So basically, that was just about making it better than it was. The roof had some ripples and some dings, lots of chips. Because of the solvent pop, the paint on the roof wasn't adhering well. So what was happening is there was little spots around the trim where the paint was coming off. Shouldn't have touched it, but I got to clean it a second time anyway. So we had to basically strip the whole roof off. And all we did, it was on there so light, we took a razor blade, scraper blade, you know, for cleaning glass windows. We shaved, how would I explain that? In case you're visual, took one of these, fresh blade, and right on the corners, we came against our roll of 400, and we drug the corner like so, and like so, about 3-4 times, that's all. And looked at it close. You don't want to drag both ways. You only want it sharp one way. You never flip that blade over. Now some guys say, yeah, but when you use it, it goes sharp on the other side, but you don't want to dig, because, you know, the more work you do, the more work you gotta do, right? More work you create, I guess. Don't do that. But you put your blade on, you go lightly, and after you make a couple passes, the blade will only pull one way. And as you go, you got to keep bringing it up. But this paint was on there, and it didn't adhere right. Probably because they either put it on way too thick. That's all I can figure. Which could be why there was solvent pop. Sometimes it's because the solvent, as it's curing, comes out, gets heavy with humidity and falls back, creates craters. The other thing that happens, the roof gets too much paint, too thick, trying to get it shiny. And then what happens is the solvent gets trapped under it as the paint's drying, and it pops holes coming through. But either way, for whatever reason, we took a razor blade to the trunk lid, sheared right off in a few minutes. Might have taken us an hour, being really careful on the roof. And the nice thing is there was a lot of primer underneath it, and it basically just lifted right off that primer. So we added some primer, and then we blocked it out. There was some chips and stuff we filled, but by the time we were done blocking it out, there was almost no filler showing on the roof, because we went past the chips we filled, which is great because the roof is really, really good now, where before it was not awesome. Now the funny thing about that, we came off the edge of the roof, and on this side it came down to about halfway. You could not get that paint off. Again, you use a razor, you want to go as light as you can and just peel the layer that it allows you. If you go by force, it's going to dig and create a bunch of bodywork. Now on this side, as soon as we came over this edge, paint wasn't as thick, got hard. So this stuff, everywhere else on the car was hard as a rock. It ain't chipping off. It's hard to get off. This panel seemed okay. Now the trunk lid was terrible down here, And as we came up here, it almost didn't want to come off. So that means they likely had the right amount of paint, and for some reason they got fat at the bottom. This panel was okay. That last little bit on the trunk lid, we had to feather it out and sand it off, because I'd say it was failing to maybe 3/4 of the way up. The roof was failing everywhere. Now the funny thing with the fenders, the tops of the fenders weren't all solvent popped, but because we had to fix them anyway, from this way in, we were able to shave it off. As you came up to the line, it was stuck on really, really well. The nice thing about that is we were able to stay with kind of a repaint and not strip the whole car down. So we had to fill these in, clean them up, prime them. And I mean, the car's really straight. Everything's been blocked and guide coated and blocked, and you get the idea. So I think we're gonna have a pretty nice car. These were a little messy. We cleaned them up. And we blocked everything down until the moment you saw a little bit of paint show through, stop. Because we want to keep it straight, not go back to whatever weirdness was there. So the body and paint that was done on this was done 25, maybe even longer, right? Years ago. So we don't know how good it was. It probably wasn't awesome. But you got to think, back in those days, these cars weren't worth a fortune. Someone brought it in and likely had pings and dents and scratches, and they just basically did a quick body job, filled the whole thing with filler, and painted the car. That's kind of the way it was back then. Now the good thing is the bottom has no rot, bottom of the doors, all the sills, all that, super clean, really nice car. This would be a great candidate to properly restore. But you can only do what a guy asks you to do, so that's what we're doing. Anyway, just thought it would be neat to do the last update. I'm going to go ahead, fix the rest of those little scratches and chips at the front of the car right here and underneath the valance. I'll do that off camera, prime it, and basically this is paint ready, so whether I paint it today or tomorrow, when she's done, we'll do another video. Cheers.